Hi, welcome to Non-Destructive Design. This is the first video in hopefully many. So let's load up Photoshop, and you can see here I've actually created a similar sort of Photoshop icon. So if we open up a new Photoshop file and go, and we'll just give us a name, Adobe Icons. Now I've made mine 500 by 500, but you can make that any size you prefer. And for this particular image, RGB probably would be best. And we've got our image. So now we're going to go to the rounded rectangle tool down here, and we want to make sure that we've got the path tool selected, not the shape layer. And I'm going to hold shift, so that will constrain from to make it a perfect square. And I'm going to just drag out a shape. Now, if we come over here to our layers, you'll notice that we've got only the background layer. We want to leave that, and we also want to leave that locked. So we're going to come down to the bottom here, and we're going to click New. So let's go to the paths palette up the top here now, and you'll notice that that path there is the current work path. So what we want to do is we want to now fill that on our new layer. So I'm going to fill that. I'm going to deselect the layer. And we're going to come back here to our layers palette, and I'm just going to give this a name. I'm going to call this icon. Now let's double click on the icon layer, and it brings up our layer styles. So there's a few things here that we want to do. So first of all, let's go to the gradient overlay and select the actual gradient colors. And if we select this bottom left hand icon here, you'll notice that we can actually change the colors. And I want it dark, but I don't want it that dark. So we're going to go a little bit lighter. And the white is not quite dark enough, so we need to darken that up a little. And this is providing us with just the tone from dark to light, okay, not the actual color. So make sure you stay with the blacks. You don't want to be putting a color in here just yet. So click OK on that window. Now we want to come over to the color overlay, and if we drop down the blend mode, select overlay, you'll notice that it now uses the same tones but with the new color. So this is how we're going to be choosing our color. So let's change the red now, and let's make this a really nice blue, a bit closer to sort of the Photoshop icon. So let's go with a yellowy color, just make it a little bit different, I suppose. Now, it looks really nice. We've got our color, we've got our gradient. If we come here to our bevel and emboss, and what I suggest is drop the depth right down to 1, make the size 3. Actually, let's make that 2. Now what we want to do, I actually like to add a black glow, and with the glow it defaults to screen, which means on white you actually won't see it. So what we need to do is change the blend mode to normal, and I drop the opacity to probably 40% and just increase the size. So we just end up with this really nice subtle underneath shadow, just to lift it off the page a little bit. I just think it looks a little nicer, even with a completed product. So click OK. Alright, we now have our bottom panel. Now, if we come over to the text tool, you'll notice that if we click on the image, it will automatically create a new text layer. But before we actually type the text, just make sure, this is kind of important, you can choose any font you want. I'm going with Arial Black, has a nice solid black color. And I've picked a size of, say, 230 point. And I want to make sure that the sharp has been turned on for the anti-aliasing. And I want to make sure that it's centered. Now the last thing I want to do here is with the color. I'm actually going to let the color be white, same as the background. It doesn't really matter because, again, we're going to apply layer styles to this in a second. So now I'm going to click roughly down the bottom here on the baseline in the center, so I end up with my text, and I'm going to type the letters PS for Photoshop, and I'm now going to select this, so it's committed it. Now I'm going to teach you a really nice trick here. So if we come back to the layers, if I hold down the Command key or Control key on a PC, and then click on the actual image for a given layer, you'll notice that actually selects all the pixels for that layer. This becomes really useful because I haven't selected the icon layer itself. I've still got the text selected, as you can see. But because I now have a rectangle there, it means that I can now come up to the Layers menu, align layer to selection, and I can vertically center it, and I can do the same again to horizontally center it. So now I know that that text is perfectly centered around the entire shape, without even if I move it around. So now we can press Command D or Control D on a PC to deselect that layer. So now if we come back to our Layers palette again, and we now double click on the text layer, I'm going to add a color overlay again. This time I'm going to go to black, and I want to lower the opacity to about 76% for this at this point. We'll come back to this in a second and tweak this. And now I'm going to come across here, and we want to go to the inner shadow. And I'm happy with the shadow, but I do want it to be a little bit softer. So I'm just going to increase that size so we get that really nice softness to it. And you can see the effect that that's having already. Now this is where it gets a little bit more. This is the most important part of this. You remember with the effect that we could see underneath. So before we do that, let's click OK on this layer palette, and let's go up to File and Place. And just locate an image. Any image will do. I'm just going to place this image on here and fill it across the page. But what I want to do is I want to move this layer, this new layer, down onto the background and right click it and say Merge Down. That will actually make that image the background itself. Now you'll notice that we cannot see that image through this, okay? So let's add that. If we double click on the text layer again, there's a feature underneath blending options. There's actually a feature here called Knockout. And if we drop this down and choose Deep, you'll notice that nothing happens yet. So now the fill opacity, because we're not going to use that white color that was actually for the text itself. So if we lower that down, you'll notice that we start to see what's underneath. And we can go right down if we wanted to. But I'm going to go to about 60%, so we just see what's underneath it. And click OK. And there you have it. We now have the Photoshop icon. Now I like to do one more thing. If we come back to that text layer one more time and go to the outer layer, outer glow, you'll notice we get a really, really thick outer glow around it. It's a little bit strong, and also it's yellow. We want this to be we want this to recognize tones, but we don't want it to recognize colors. So if we change that yellow to, say, a light gray, click OK, and you can leave that on overlay, but I actually prefer, on screen, but I actually prefer overlay so it blends with the current color. And then I just drop that opacity until it becomes just a faint outline. And it gives you that sort of rounded, well not rounded, sorry, like a cut sort of edge. It's a little bit more realistic. And then just click OK. Alright, we've done it. We have a Photoshop icon. Now the trick to this is where this becomes extremely non-destructive. If I now want to change that text, I can now double click on the text layer, and I can actually change this to, say, IT, and you'll notice that the effect is still applied for the current text. So that was the first. The second thing is, what if we want to change the color? Well, that's not a problem either. If we come down to the icon layer one more time and go straight to the color overlay, you'll notice that we can actually change this to pretty much any color, and the effect remains applied. And the last thing we can do as well is, because we obviously made that underneath semi-transparent, if we hide that background and now save this out as a PNG, you could put it on any web page background, and this will retain its semi-transparency on that page. You could then obviously import this into an alternate program to create an actual icon file from this, in which case you'll be able to use it in one of your applications. So I hope that this tutorial was helpful to you, and look forward to making the next one.